Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2024 edition of the YDL Sports Network. Chris Rossetti here along with Brian Hagberg, and tonight we're going to be talking about some of the key question marks facing District 9 and District 10 football this year. Hard to believe, Brian, that we're just 2 days away from the start of high school football.
Well, it's funny you say because we are 2 days away from the start of high school football. But I'll tell you what, waking up, going outside this morning, I think we should be sitting here talking about like week 6 and who we think's going to make the playoffs. This certainly does not feel like week 1 weather here in northwestern Pennsylvania. That's for sure.
No, it doesn't. It was cold, way too cold for August. That's for sure. But
My heater kicked on this morning, and that's just no. It should not be doing that in August.
I just refuse to leave my heater in a position where it can even kick on in August. Well, Brian, we're looking forward to another exciting year of high school sports here on the YDL Sports Network. That'll start Friday night. You have a football game up in Warren County. The Warren Dragons host Conneaut. Interesting choice there. You guess you're going for the streak buster there, as the Dragons haven't won in 2 years. But anyhow, you should have a lot of fun. You and Cody Alms over in Warren at War Memorial. Larry Weiser and I are going to be from Larry Weiser's field in Clarion. I think that when the field gets named after you, you have to do a few games from there every once in a while.
Right.
So it'll be Central Clarion against Du Bois. Both of those games start at 7 p.m. You can also catch the Central Clarion Du Bois game on Seven Mountains Media in and around Clarion County as well. We're happy to have that simulcast with them again this year, as we've had the last couple of years. First with C93 and then with Seven Mountains Media. That's been a great partnership there. So we're real excited about that. But Brian, we've kind of this year done things a little differently. You had an opportunity. You and I had an opportunity to go to District 9 Media Day, but instead of doing videos with each of the schools, we decided that we just kind of talk to people and see what they thought was going to happen. But boy, it's really difficult when you're doing Media Day on August 1st to have any real good feel for how it's going to go. And instead of making people sit through a bunch of videos that didn't tell them anything, we thought we'd talk to some people, and then talk to some people as the camps got underway, and then you and I would sit down and just discuss what we learned.
Yeah, I mean, it's the standard response when you really try to ask any kind of probing questions at media day is, well, we're just focused on August 5th, which was the start of heat acclimation, and it's standard football speak, all 1 week at a time and that kind of thing. Because really, if you haven't started heat acclimation yet, right, what do you really know about your team at that point? So
you don't even know who's showing up, maybe.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of teams, throughout, and not just in District 9 and 10, but throughout the Commonwealth. That hey, you got guys showing up all summer long, and then all of a sudden, heat act starts the first week of 2-a-days start, and they're MIA, and for whatever reason they just don't show, or somebody gets hurt doing something off the field that you thought you were going to have somebody, and then you come to camp and they're showing up in a walking boot or something. And so it's really hard for anybody to give any kind of reasonable answer about their where their team's at that point in time.
So tonight's show is sponsored by the Allegheny Grille in Foxburg. The Allegheny Grille in Foxburg, where you come for the food and you stay for the view. AlleghenyGrill.com. Always a great place to get some food, sit down, enjoy great conversation, overlook the river. This time of year, it's always beautiful with the leaves out. And as we head into fall, it even becomes prettier when the leaves start to turn colors at the Allegheny Grill. And make sure that if you have a special event coming up, they've got that, not brand new anymore. It's a year old now, but that wood framed event center outside is just gorgeous. So without further ado, Brian, let's look into the top 10 questions involving, or top 5 questions involving District 10. Number 1 on that list, Mike Mishler, the longtime head coach at Cathedral Prep, 5 state titles. He's back with Prep, not as the head coach, but as the offensive coordinator. And what does that mean for the Cathedral Prep team that last year finished 7-4, which under their standards is probably a little bit of a disappointment?
Yeah. I mean, and that was still a very, very good Cathedral Prep team, and going to be a very, very good Cathedral Prep team again. And I think, having a coach of Michelin caliber on your sideline, just having that influence there can provide a spark. You've got somebody who, like you said, 5 state titles, a whole bunch of wins. But that's just somebody that you can look to when you're in a tight game, you're in a spot where you need to make something happen, and you can look over your shoulder and say, all right, coach, what do you got? What kind of play call do you got here? To get this offense going, we need a big play, whatever the case may be. That's somebody with a whole lot of not just experience, but successful experience, that you now got as another voice on your sideline, that can provide some of those. Hey, this is what we did in the past, and this is a play that worked for us when we needed to have it. Let's give this one a shot and see what happens.
Yeah, and this might be an important year to have him a part of that coaching staff. They returned only 7 total starters from last year, 5 on offense, 2 on defense. It's been a long time since you could say that about a Cathedral Prep team.
Yeah, and it'll definitely be interesting to see how the Ramblers fare this season. They're gonna get right into region play right out of the gate, with game against Erie, and I think that will be a good test for them. I think Prep probably comes out on top in that one, but strong way to start the season, and they schedule themselves, that difficult kind of interstate schedule, intentionally, so that they can get themselves ready and really get focused on, getting prepared to make those postseason runs.
Yeah, I mean, and they're going to have to look strong at especially on the defensive side to senior Monte Hollingsworth. He had 84 tackles, including 5 sacks a year ago. So he's going to be a key player, I think, for Cathedral Prep there on defense, and maybe even more so from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, and that's, like you said, when you've only got a handful of guys coming back from a team a year ago, those guys that are coming back really have to step into those leadership roles and assume that responsibility, to make sure that those younger guys that are having to fill roles that maybe they weren't quite ready for yet, are ready to step up and do what they need to do, in order to have the kind of success that you're accustomed to and that is the expectation at Cathedral Prep.
No question. Moving on to our question number 4, and this one's going to be a fantastic, I would imagine, race. How does the Class 3A playoff scene shake out? Obviously, you have Hickory back. They were the state semifinalist a year ago, lost to Bell Vernon. Sharon, who beat Hickory in the regular season and is a defensive standout football program. Grove City has established itself as a program. Fairview's in there. There's definitely that definitely, once again, you would think would be the classification to look at in District.
Yeah, and I think, when you're looking at these smaller school classifications, especially, a lot of times it starts and ends with those teams in the South, especially in Mercer County. And this year's going to be no different. I think, Sharon and Hickory probably the favorites in that classification to start the season. And Hickory's going to find out where it stands right out of the gate. Big one against Farrell on Saturday. The Hornets are going to learn real quick exactly what kind of team they have against the perennial powerhouse in 2A now at Farrell, or with Farrell. That'll be a great test for them. And Sharon, again, you mentioned that defense. I got a chance to see them up close and personal in week 2 last year, and they were just phenomenal. And they bring back a ton of talent from a defense that was really, really good a year ago. The question for Sharon's going to be, they got to break in some new players offensively, including at quarterback. And how long is it going to take for that offense to kind of get rolling and get them on track?
Yeah, we lose a member of the all-name team, graduated, Mr. Ham.
Yeah,
It was the quarterback last year. Great quarterback for Sharon. Was But you talked about their defense, Sharon, and you bring back your two leading tacklers from a defense that was outstanding. Brody Miller and Bryson Roberson, both were juniors last year, and that defense was beyond stellar.
Mm-hmm.
That defense gave up 68 points in 2023. When you play defense like that, it's pretty good. Now, Hickory found a way to score a couple of touchdowns on them. They scored 14. They only gave up 6. Thus, they won the District 10 championship. Thus, they moved, and then they moved beyond that. They picked up a key PIAA playoff win over Central Martinsburg, and then ran into Bell Vernon, and that was Bell Vernon ended up winning the state title for a second straight year. But the Hornets, they've got 7 guys back on both offense and defense, including quarterback Xander Telez, almost 1,500 yards, 18 touchdowns through the air, and another 650 on the ground and 10 touchdowns a year.
Yeah, just absolutely one of the most dynamic players in District 10, and certainly going to be one that the Hornets look to kind of guide them as they look to get back to the state semifinals and beyond potentially this year. But again, that whole region that those two teams are in, Region 4 in District 10, I mean, you're talking Hickory, Sharon, Slippery Rock, Grove City, Conneaut, and Titusville. And don't sleep on Titusville. Titusville could be sneaky good. The last couple of years, you've seen them kind of building a little bit towards maybe getting back to one of those teams. They could be potentially, this year's kind of Northeast. And Northeast is another team in 3A that really kind of took teams by surprise last year and became a playoff team, but they lost their head coach to the college ranks, and it'll be interesting to see how they fare now under new leadership and whether they can continue that success that they saw a year ago.
When you talk about Titusville, it just I feel like that stadium, that town, it could be something special if they could get back on top.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's one of those areas that they're just they're starved for that success, and if you can come out and in 2024 you become a playoff team, that's the support that they're going to get in that stadium, which is now with the turf and everything that they've done. The District 10's hosted a ton of playoff games there in Titusville, and I always love going down and calling games from there because it's such a unique stadium too, with the stands in the one side of the end zone there. And but yeah, you're absolutely right, Chris. That's one of those areas that really could kind of take off for them. And you look at Titusville a year ago, they were 6-4 overall. Their 4 losses were to Sharpsville in week 2, which when the Blue Devils were just racking up points.
Yeah, that was a weird season for Sharpsville last year, but yeah.
Yeah, and then lost to 4A Meadville, and then and also in Fort LaBeouf in between. But then they went on a little win streak there, won 4 straight before losing a tight one against Oil City, who was going to be the subject of question 3 here coming up in a minute. But then came back and ended the season with a win over Corey, and that's again, those are the kind of things that a team that's kind of in that rebuilding, going back up cycle, when you can end the season with a pretty big win like that, and you return in a ton of production, especially at the quarterback position with Ian McDonald, threw for over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns, ran for another 325 and 8 touchdowns. You bring back a 1,300-yard rusher in Jackson Covell, and there are a lot of good things that are possible with this Titusville team this year.
You were talking about Northeast new head coach. That new head coach is Chris, and I'm going to butcher his name. I'm sure I'll probably pronounce it Greg Chowski. Has 12 years where he coached it as an assistant at Cathedral Prep, but this is his first head coaching job. And the grade pickers, I don't want to say they were decimated by graduation, but they did graduate a lot of guys from last year. So it'll be interesting to see if the younger kids learn something from the success they had. Sometimes that's all it takes. You have 1 year of success, and then the kids underneath that start to see that, decide they're going to put in the work, and it turns things around well. So, but I do think that's going to come down to Sharon and Hickory. Grove City again, well coached, really a program. At the end of the day, they go 7-4 last year, and again, you just feel like that's never a team that you want to sleep on, right? The Eagles,
No,
if you
definitely
sleep
not.
on the Eagles, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And again, Sam Mowry's down there. Struggled a little bit his first couple of years there, but really has found his footing. And since he's found that footing, Grove City's just been one of those teams that you just can't count them out ever. It seems like, oh well, maybe they'll lose. No, they just keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. And you mentioned the record a year ago, but again, they tested themselves early, played Avonworth out of the gate, lost a one-score game at Farrell, and then fell to Hickory twice. So again, this is a team that record 7-4, but you look at those four losses, and certainly not any of those type of games where you go, oh man, how did they find a way to lose that one kind of deal? But they are
Now,
going to have to replace one of those
it took it right out of my
perennial
mouth.
athletes there in Hunter Holman. But
Yeah,
again,
3,200 yards. I don't know if you just like snap your finger and replace 3,200
but
yards, but I got to imagine that Nathan Greer takes a front seat somewhere. I mean, I know last year it was catching passes, but could it be somewhere else this year too? And they but I mean, unbelievably, Homan was the only guy to throw a pass for them last year. Usually you
yeah,
see
well, that's
maybe
that's
other.
really incredible. I mean, even and especially the way they kind of play, that surprising that they didn't get somebody in some mop up time or something along the way. But so yeah, so they're gonna have some questions coming out of the gate. But again, I mean, it's just they're just a team. You just can't count them out.
Folks, we're going to step aside. Thank the Allegheny Grill here in Foxburg. When we get back, we'll look at the last couple of questions in District 10 and then move into the District 9 stuff too. I know a lot of you are probably on board waiting to hear that part of it. That is coming up here. You are watching the 2024 YDL Sports Network football pregame show sponsored by the Allegheny Grill in Foxburg.
When it's your special day, we know you want everything to be just perfect. That's why at the Allegheny Grill in Foxburg, we spared no expense in creating our new indoor-outdoor wood-framed event center with waterfalls, gorgeous views of the Allegheny River, a fire pit, and plenty of parking. The Allegheny Grill in Foxburg will take care of everything from catering to bartending, so all you have to do is bring the fun. We do it all for your wedding, anniversary party, corporate event, and so much more. One look at our new facility and we know you'll fall in love. And remember, the view is always free at the Allegheny Grill in Foxburg, PA.
What's the recipe for surprising the kids, treating yourself, and ditching dish duty? You're looking at it. Order your Pizza Hut faves like original pan, original stuffed crust, and more at pizzahut.com. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
Back here on the Allegheny Grill of Foxburg, YDL Sports Network preseason football show. Chris Rossetti here alongside Brian Hagberg from the YDL Sports Network. And all right, we're talking about District 10. And third question: who takes over the bell cow row at Oil City now that Ethan Knox is gone? The thing about Dan York and his offense is that you're bound to see somebody that puts up big time numbers.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody disagrees that it's going to be somebody. The question just is, who is that somebody? I mean, you look at Oil City's numbers from a year ago, 448 carries as a team. Well, Ethan Knox had 297 of them. So you say, okay, well, who was next? All right. Well, Johnny Hargenrader had 43, but he also graduated. All right. Who's next? Oh, well, there's Kevin Pearsall had 35, but he graduated too. So now you're down to your fourth leading carrier from a year ago. And Sean Alexander had 34 carries, 233 yards, and 3 scores. And then behind him is quarterback Cole Finley with 19 carries, 104 yards. So again, that's the question is who takes over that role? And it's got to be one of the, if you're a running back, you've got to be salivating at the chance to really take over that role as the guy in a Dan York offense.
Yeah, Cole Finley, Cranberry student, part of the co-op with them. Fantastic athlete. Obviously, as you said, played quarterback last year. I'd imagine that he runs the ball, whether it's out of that quarterback spot, whether they move him into more of a running back role, what we shall see. But threw for over 700 yards a year ago. So obviously, sometimes with the Oil City offense, it's about surprising people. And so you get a lot of yards that way. Didn't have the greatest completion percentage or anything like that. But obviously an athlete like that, you could see be a guy that steps in, but that also could be a guy that was on the JV team that we've never even heard of at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about throwing for over 700 yards, and the fact that they even attempted 80 passes last year is a little bit surprising. I mean, I went a couple of years ago, I went and covered one of their playoff game against Slippery Rock, and I think it was maybe 1 or 2 passes were thrown the entire ball game. And but again, like you said, Chris, it could be somebody that maybe didn't get a lot of carries at the varsity level a year ago and kind of showed some chops during camp and is ready to assume that role. But you got to think whoever it is, they're going to get a ton of carries. They're going to see the volume. It's whether they can translate that volume into the kind of yardage that we've become accustomed to seeing from Oil City running backs.
Now, moving into our second question, Farrell, boy, they lost a couple of key contributors to transfers. They graduated some key contributors, but they're Farrell, and it's Farrell football. Can they still not just be in the mix for District 10 2A, where I think they're still the favorites? Can they be in the mix for making the 2A PIAA title game now that Westinghouse is single A?
Yes. I mean, I'm never going to say, Farrell team is not going to be in the mix for something like that. They're just, they're that perennial. They don't rebuild. They just reload. It seems like year after year after year. And the things that AMP has done with that program down there, AMP East down at the head coach down there, Farrell, has done with that program, just absolutely incredible. I mean, even in the move from 1A to 2A that they made a few years ago, just didn't seem to slow them down at all.
Well, I would expect that Aaron Pegues is probably going to take back over at quarterback, AMP's son, and then they'll go from there. But that's you got a coach's son who could be running the show. That can be a pretty cool place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where we're seeing that kind of hype right now at the college level with out at Colorado with Dion and Shedeur Sanders. But yeah, certainly as a head coach, when it's your kid running the offense, you've got to have a little bit more confidence that way because they've really come up with your system and seeing what you do and understanding it. And you've got all that extra, time where you're not on the field, you're just at home talking about stuff that you can really hash things out and make sure that all the mental aspects of the position are in place and really understood. And then it just becomes, okay, in your head, what you need to do now, just let your athleticism take over.
Well, and then, they do return their leading rusher, Jules Johnson, as well. He ran for over 1,000 yards a year ago. But really what's going to come to fruition is how quickly does their offensive line come together. They lose a lot of guys from there, and that's really where it starts is how quickly can Farrell's line gel and get together and play. They're kind of like the other Steelers in town. I know you're not a big Steeler fan, Brian, but the Pittsburgh Steelers have a young offensive line, and the real question mark is everybody knows it's talented, but how long does it take to gel? And you were an offensive lineman, and talk about the importance of that sort of thing. That kind of sort of everybody looks, well, there's a lot of talent, but they don't understand how an offensive line works together. Talk a little bit about that from your experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, and every offense has its own, calls and signals and whatever you're going to do, rules of how you're blocking and all that. And you're talking about playing as an offensive lineman in years ago, but I mean, I played at tackle primarily, and when you could come up to a line and look at a defense, and it got to a point when one of the guards that I played with where, we could just kind of tap each other on the leg and point at, the way, a defensive lineman or a linebacker or somebody was lined up, and we would know, okay, that means I'm going to do this and you're going to do that. And that's how we're going to create the hole. It just makes the offense run much more smoothly because now you're not, as a lineman, your calls aren't interfering with what the quarterback may be calling from under center or, back in the gun as seems to be more prolific as we move along here. But, it just, everybody just knows where everybody is supposed to be. There's no confusion when you have that chemistry, when you're able to just, hand signal or 1 or 2 word calls that change the protection or call out a blitz or a stun or whatever it may be. Those kind of things are invaluable, and it can really, take an offense from good to great.
Our final question in District 10, Wilmington, back down to single A. They struggled a little bit the last couple of years in double A. What does the move to single A mean for the Greyhounds? Single A, obviously won by Cambridge Springs last year. Reynolds has been in the mix over the years. So is Eisenhower, but both of those teams are a little bit on the downside of things. But what does being in single A mean for Wilmington, Brian?
Well, I mean, certainly it first of all, it gets them out of that gauntlet of a region that we mentioned a little bit ago with, Hickory and Sharon and excuse me, and all those teams. But, so now they're, Reynolds, Kennedy, Farrell, Sharpsville, and Mercer are in a region now with Wilmington, and they're down in 1A. And you mentioned Cambridge Springs, the defending champion, who should be back in the thick of it again this year, along with Lakeview, who was the D10 runner-up a year ago. And those two teams had a couple of classic games, one in the regular season and then one again for the District 10 championship. I expect both of them will be in the mix as well. And don't forget, we talk about Wilmington coming down, the big power. Greenville has moved down to 1A too. And, again, another one of those kind of Southern teams that's, we talked a little bit ago about back when I played. And when I played, Greenville was in a conference. I was at Warren, and, they were in a conference with us and Franklin and Oil City and Titusville. And they were the big dogs that ran that conference. You knew when you played them, you were going to get smacked around. But again, from Wilmington's standpoint, this has got to be one of those, hey, we don't have to worry about trying to compete with Farrell right now. We know what we're going to get from our Southern opponents, in Reynolds and Greenville and Mercer. And you look at, Cambridge Springs going to be in the thick of it. Eisenhower's down as far as numbers this year, but again, they're a team that's always going to be hard nosed and come and play tough and physical. But I think the athleticism for Wilmington could be the difference maker in a lot of those games.
You're going athleticism. I'm going offensive line. When you move down to single A and you're starting an offensive lineman like Colin Raleigh, who's 6'3", 240, and Jacob Coulter, who's 6'3", 285. That's just, those sizes aren't found in single A football. Those are double A, triple A, 4A and above type offensive linemen that really can make the difference. Those are people movers. It's kind of like at the current Pittsburgh airport, you have the people mover to take you from the parking lot to landside terminal. Well, Wilmington's got itself a couple people movers in Raleigh and Coulter, and that's something. When they're good, it's because they have people movers.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the old adage is, games are won and lost in the trenches. And as a former lineman myself, wholeheartedly agree with that. But
You mean disagree with that?
yeah, but it's interesting. You talk about the size of some of those guys, and yeah, that can make a difference. But living up here in Warren County, I've just watched for the last 3-4 years. You mentioned Eisenhower's been in the thick of it, been to the District 10 at least semifinals each of the last 4 years, and they did it with hard-nosed, tough, physical linemen. They weren't physically, big, they didn't have anybody that was 6'3", 260 plus. So the key to that is, yes, the size is great, but can you use that size to your advantage and come out and really, as you said, be a people mover as opposed to, somebody who's maybe getting beat off the line by a faster or stronger defensive lineman.
No question in that regard. And as you look at it, I do like Wilmington there, but I think Cambridge Springs showed last year. That was a sort of a miracle run. The way that they came back in some games and some things, but when they ran into Red Bank Valley, they ran into a team that was big and physical in the state playoffs, and it was a difference for Cambridge Springs, a little bit different. And so I think that Wilmington's physicality could be a real key there. We're going to step aside. When we get back, we'll discuss District 9. You're watching the YDL Sports Network 2024 preseason football discussion powered by the Allegheny Grille in Foxburg, PA.
When it's your special day, we know you want everything to be just perfect. That's why at the Allegheny Grille in Foxburg, we spared no expense in creating our new indoor-outdoor wood-framed event center with waterfalls, gorgeous views of the Allegheny River, a fire pit, and plenty of parking. The Allegheny Grille in Foxburg will take care of everything from catering to bartending, so all you have to do is bring the fun. We do it all for your wedding, anniversary party, corporate event, and so much more. One look at our new facility and we know you'll fall in love. And remember, the view is always free at the Allegheny Grille in Foxburg, PA. With locations in Shippenville and Tionesta Builder Supply is a full-service home improvement center specializing in everything you need to build or remodel your home. From power tools and accessories to paint and sundries and general hardware merchandise, Tionesta Builders has everything you need to get your project done quickly. Find out more at tionestabuilders.us and like them on Facebook.
Ready to break into a rewarding career? Elwood National Forge can help. Elwood National Forge produces critical defense-rated parts to all branches of the United States military, meaning each day our employees are doing their part to support the men and women protecting our country. With multiple positions currently available and several career paths to choose from, Elwood National Forge offers on-site and on-the-job training, competitive pay and benefits, including 401k and insurance that start the date of hire, paid time off, and long-term job security. We'd love to support you in building a career. To learn more about becoming part of the Elwood National Forge family, visit enfjobs.com.
Let's move on over to District 9 here on the YDL Sports Network. Preseason football show powered by the Allegheny Grille in Foxburg, where you come for the food and stay for the view, AlleghenyGrille.com. District 9, Brian, one of the first things that jumps out is Brockway. Brockway was going to be moved up to AA enrollment-wise, mainly because of the taking the career centers and the way those numbers were counted. They were going to move up to AA. They elected to go to AAA, where they're one of just 2 AAA teams, and it makes for an interesting look at District 9 3A, because you have Brockway, a smaller AAA school, obviously a AA school playing AAA. They do have that co-op with Du Bois Central Catholic, so some might say, hey, they probably should be AAA anyhow. And then you have another team that's co-op, St. Mary's co-oping this year with Elk County Catholic. Not that Elk County Catholic has had stellar football, but what they do have is athletes, and a couple of those great athletes in Frankie Smith and Will Wortman, who arguably are 2 of the better athletes in all of District 9, now playing football for the Dutch, and that really could make that interesting. And of course, Brockway under Jake Heigl, they kind of were knocking on that single A door, but never could quite knock it down. 3-year starting quarterback Braden Fox decided not to play football this year. So sophomore Aiden Patton, who got a fair amount of time, including a couple starts last year, moves into the starting quarterback role for Brockway. But is this the year that Brockway punches through, or will St. Mary's with those kids from Elk County Catholic become the team to win? And they were kind of a team that always kept seeming to run into a Clearfield or a Punxsutawney or somebody like that and couldn't break through. So somebody's got to break through and get into at least the sub-regional there.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great question. I had a chance to chat with St. Mary's at the District 9 Media Day that we talked about way back at the beginning of the show. And, one of the things that they mentioned about this co-op is that, this isn't like, for example, right, like, Sheffield and Abraxas co-op, and every year it's a whole different crop of kids, and they've got to spend the first few days of camp just getting to know each other. Where, yeah, these kids are going to different schools, but all of them mentioned that they came up playing youth football together, were familiar with each other, knew who each other was. And so it's not one of those situations where you're coming into it and everybody's brand new and doesn't know who the other guys are. This is a co-op where these kids have been playing with each other until they got to that, junior high school level. And now they're just going to keep doing it. So that could be advantageous for the Dutch in the early going of this co-op. And like you said, it really helps that you get some of the best athletes in the district as part of it as well.
Yeah, and then you look over at Brockway, and of course we talked about how Aiden Patton's going to have to step in and now show that he can be the starting quarterback. A kid that if you see him on social media doesn't lack for confidence. He's a kid that believes in his talents, and now he's going to get that opportunity to show it. And then he's got a pretty good receiving core to throw to there. Blake Pisarchik's back. Caleb Doherty is back. Pisarchik was 1,000-yard last year. Doherty had 765 and 11 touchdowns. So I mean, if you're going to have a new full-time starting quarterback, having receivers like that is a really great place to start. And had the opportunity to see Doherty and Caleb is a man at 15, 16 years old. And then we all know what Blake Pisarchik can do. We've seen him on the baseball diamond for DuBois Central Catholic. We've seen him on the football field for Brockway. And those are two really special guys that Aiden Patton's going to be able to throw the ball to.
Well, and like you said, it helps that he got a couple of starts a year ago. So it's not like he's coming into this having not had any time to build chemistry with these guys. And then obviously, I'm sure throughout the offseason and the summer, they've been working together. But, like you said, it certainly makes it a little easier when you're walking into that role of, hey, I got two guys on the outside that, I know if I put the ball up and put it pretty much anywhere near them, they're going to come down with it. It allows you to have a little bit more of that confidence in your ability because, the guys you're throwing to are just as good.
One of the things Brockway's going to have to do, they're going to have to eliminate turnovers. They turned the ball over 24 times last year. A lot of that was interceptions. Braden Fox, as great of an athlete as he had, threw 18 interceptions last year from that quarterback spot. So I know they're hoping that Patton, now Aiden, he threw 3 touchdowns but 2 interceptions out of his 56 passes a year ago. And so they're going to have to cut down on that aspect of things because you can't turn the ball over that many times in high school football and expect to win.
No, absolutely not. And that's, as a coach, you look at those kind of things and say, all right, was that scheme? Was that guy's not being in the right spot? Was it a poor decision making from, the quarterback or the running back or whoever, or was it just bad bounces? And, if you can really go back and self-analyze that and figure out what it was that led to all those turnovers, you got a much better shot of correcting that. And like you said, Chris, even if you cut those things in half from a year ago, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot if you're Brockway.
Moving on to question number 4, and it involves 2 brand new head coaches at the 2 southern, middle and then southern Jefferson County schools. Brandon Snyder takes over at Punxsutawney, and real question is the Chucks have really started to move upwards with their football program. They went 7-4 last year, finished 3rd in a tough Region 1, and then Brookville, which was the second place team, quietly the second place team in Region won last year with a 9-3 overall record, 6-1 in conference play, region play. Only lost an early season loss to Central Clarion, who they gave everything the Wildcats could handle in that game. They're under the direction of Bill Morrison, who was an assistant last year, but is taken over as the head man. I'll say this: had an opportunity to talk to Bill Morrison. When I was done talking to Bill Morrison, I was ready to run through a wall for him.
Well, yeah, and that's one of those things. There's some of those coaches just have that it factor, and they know how to get the best out of their players. And and if you're just having a conversation with them and you're getting ready to run through a wall, I think that probably bodes well for Brookville.
And with Punxsutawney on the other hand, what they've got coming back is some really talented skill guys. It starts with their quarterback, Maddox Hetrick, who had a really solid year a year ago, threw for almost 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns as a sophomore. Bo Thomas, another sophomore, he ran for 427 yards and 6 touchdowns. Also caught 46 passes for 611 yards and 7 touchdowns. And also in that mix, Logan Moore as well. And so there are some, at least from a skill-wise place, Punxsutawney and their new head coach, Brandon Snyder, have some really talented guys to turn to there.
Yeah, and I had a chance to chat with Punxsutawney and Coach Brandon Snyder, and it's while I wasn't ready to run through a wall when I was done talking to him, but really seemed to have this. There's no need for us to reinvent the wheel kind of approach. They've seen what's worked for them over the last couple of years to kind of get them on this upward trajectory, and now they're just focused on taking the next step. And like you said, when you've got athletes like Hetrick and Thomas that now are going to be juniors that have a lot of game experience and had some success on the field, those are guys that you can turn to now and say, all right, here's a couple of guys that we can put the ball in their hands and good things are going to happen for us.
I'm going to step aside, thank some of our sponsors here. When we come back, we'll continue our look at District 9 football here on the Allegheny Grille and Foxburg High School Football Preseason Show on the YDL Sports Network.
When it's your special day, we know you want everything to be just perfect. That's why at the Allegheny Grille in Foxburg, we spared no expense in creating our new indoor-outdoor wood-framed event center with waterfalls, gorgeous views of the Allegheny River, a fire pit, and plenty of parking. The Allegheny Grille in Foxburg will take care of everything from catering to bartending, so all you have to do is bring the fun. We do it all for your wedding, anniversary party, corporate event, and so much more. One look at our new facility and we know you'll fall in love. And remember, the view is always free at the Allegheny Grille in Foxburg, PA.
Excellence, teamwork, responsibility. Those are the foundations on which Phoenix Sintered Metals in Brockway is built. Phoenix is a Verischetti family-owned powder metal manufacturer committed to being an industry leader through excellence, innovation, and continuous improvement. Phoenix emphasizes employee teamwork as well as responsibility to the community. Like any team striving to be the best it can be, it knows that hard work and perseverance pay off.
Whether retirement is just around the corner or years away, John Bongiovanni, Lucas Slazak, and Adam Jack of Generational Wealth Management in Erie and Bradford are here for you. John, a Forbes-recognized best-in-state wealth advisor, Lucas and Adam provide customized investment advisory solutions and retirement planning services. Generational Wealth Management offers world-class investment services and internationally recognized insurance products from Northwestern Mutual, an industry leader. The Generational Wealth Management team provides a high level of expertise and service to their professional and business clients. Contact the Erie office at 814-651-0838 or the Bradford office at 814-368-4065 or check them out online at gwm.nm.com. This is Chris Rossetti from the YDL Sports Network, and I want to take a moment to tell you about my friend Paul Burdick. Paul is the Dean of District 9 Photography, and he is here to serve your needs with action photos, team photos, and so much more. Paul has shot everything from Little League through the pros and is a regular at PIAA championship events and Penn State football. Find out more or buy a photo at pburdick.smugmug.com.
Back here on the Allegheny Grille of Foxburg, YDL Sports Network High School Football Preview Show. We're examining some of the big questions in District 9, and one of those, will Port Allegheny return to the top in Class 1A. The Gators won the championship 2 years ago. Last year fell to Red Bank Valley in the title game. And Brian, you I think had an opportunity to talk to Port Allegheny at the District 9 Media Day.
Yeah, absolutely did. And this is one of those teams that the Gators now they've tasted that success and they understand what it takes to get to that level. And they certainly were not happy about not repeating as District 9 champions a year ago. They're focused on getting back to that championship game. But again, at Media Day, that's all, hey, we're focused on August 5th. We're taking it 1 week at a time. But they are going to have to find a way to replace some big time production on both sides of the ball. And offensively, they lose running back Peyton Stiles had over 1,300 yards, 19 touchdowns on the ground. Was also the leading receiver with 23 catches, over 360 yards and 4 touchdowns in the air. And then a big part of that offensive line, Miska Young, and defensively, Miska as well. The Gators had 32 and a half sacks as a team, and Miska Young had 13 of them by himself. So they're going to have to find some guys to fill in those roles. But the good news for the Gators, they do return 1,600-yard rusher Aiden Bliss is back, and along with quarterback Nick Wilfong. And so they've got pieces in place. They've still got a lot of guys returning on that offensive line, and that's really been the strength for them. We talked about it a little bit ago in the trenches.
Well, a couple. Yeah, I'm sorry, Brian. A couple of those guys, that you're talking about returning on the line include our 2-time lineman of the year, Carson Neely. I mean, that's a heck of a guy to be bringing back.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well as Yuso Young, Miska's younger brother, who is also a multiple-year starter, and that was always something that they could do. They could move. They could move people, and that's why you had 2 running backs like they had. That I mean, those 2 guys were just pile drivers. I mean, they had 2 1,300-yard rushers a year ago. A lot of that has to do with what you can do up front.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're well aware that that's a big part of their strength. And Aiden Bliss was one of the guys that they brought to Media Day, and I asked him, "What's it like running behind those big road graders up front?" And he just kind of smiled. He said, "It's a lot of fun because they do all the work. I just have to run the football." And he did say, Bliss did that. He's looking to expand his role a little bit as a pass catcher. Did catch 18 balls for 339 yards and a couple of scores a year ago. But if he can take on some of that receiving responsibility that Styles had, that's going to make him even more dangerous, and will allow probably one of the other backs that they're looking at. Maybe a guy like a Tristan Kaiser to step in and fill that role that Styles had a bit from a year ago.
For all those wrestling fans, they'll tell you, hey, those wrestlers make the best football players, and Neely, Young, and Bliss are all wrestlers. So it comes on strong there. Moving on to our number 2 question: Red Bank Valley, the defending champion, state semifinalists last year. Boy, they were hit hard by graduation, though. Brian, can they continue to make noise? Where one place they weren't hit by graduation was at quarterback with Braylon Young, who had one of the best years ever at Red Bank Valley last year at quarterback.
Yeah, well, a couple of things that in the this is 4 years now that we've been doing this, and one of the things I've learned about paying more attention to District 9 is don't count out a Blaine Gold Coach team down in Red Bank. I mean, again, they're kind of like I mentioned with Farrell. It seems like they just reload and reload and reload. And but yeah, this is going to be probably one of their more challenging years as far as getting that reload. But like you mentioned, when you bring back a stud at quarterback, that can cover up a lot of deficiencies for a long time.
I mean, what kind of stud is he, Brian? He only completed 68% of his passes last year, threw 267 of them, by the way. 3,045 yards, 46 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. If it wasn't for Jace Ferguson, who we're going to get to in a moment, he'd be far and away the best quarterback in District 9.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, no question. Yeah. But again, you look at that and you say, well, look who Wagner was throwing to, and
But yeah, Ashton Kale, Mason Klaus, Ashton George loses all those guys, and that includes Kale and Klaus, who were two 1,000-yard receivers on that team, combined to catch 35 touchdowns. They're going to have to ask a lot from guys like Rylan Roop, Jackson Huffman, Drew Byers, who was their leading rusher, Carson Gold. There's going to have to be some young players that step up to see if they can get open. And also the line is a work in progress right now, and that can destroy where you're at right out of the gate. But and they've got a rivalry game to start out too with Union AC Valley.
Yeah, and that's we talked about it earlier. How quick can that offensive line mesh and build that team chemistry? And they're gonna, like you said, rivalry game right out of the gate. Gonna have, and then you follow that with games against Brockway and Port Allegheny. So they're gonna find out in a big hurry. Red Bank Valley is where they are right as the season gets underway.
Yeah, that leads us to our top question in District 9 football. Central Clarion, how real are they? Are they real enough now that Westinghouse is out of double A into single A? Are they real enough to make a state championship game? Interestingly enough, I'm a member of a Facebook group, WPIL Edition. Somebody with no connection at all to District 9 chose his state finalists yesterday on the site and chose Central Clarion to go to the state championship game. And we kind of started talking about that a little bit. And he based it off of what he saw the last 2 years against Westinghouse and how much trouble Jace Ferguson gave the house. And I think those people in the WIPIO and the Pittsburgh City League looked at what Jace Ferguson could do and be like, hey, this guy could play for us. And that's about the ultimate compliment when you're talking to somebody from the WPIL when they're like, hey, this guy can play for us. And he really can. I mean, he is a special quarterback. I remember when they started him as a freshman, when Larry Weiser was still coaching, I kind of wondered what they were doing starting him as a freshman because I didn't know if he was necessarily their best quarterback at the time. But I was wrong. People say that Chris Rossetti never says he's wrong. We'll mark 8:38 p.m. on August 21st, 2024. Jace Ferguson is beyond the real deal. We just gave you Braylon Wagner's crazy PlayStation College Football 2025 numbers. Believe it or not, Jace Ferguson didn't throw for quite as many yards, only threw for 2,698, but he also ran for 868, ran for 10 touchdowns, threw for 46, only threw 7 interceptions. And, if like that wasn't enough, like if he wasn't, an outstanding player offensively, he also made 47 tackles, Brian, and playing both ways, and maybe the most impressive 6 interceptions as well. He is a joystick, basically. He's your PlayStation, your Xbox joystick. Just saw a highlight. They scrimmaged Carrick on Saturday. Had a chance to see a highlight of they let him run the ball once because it was his birthday, I think. At least that's the story that his dad told. Right. Larry Weiser told me about it before I saw it. He had gone over, watched it. We were talking on Saturday. He's like, Chris, he made 9 guys miss. And then I watched, he made 9 guys miss. It starts there, but the thing is it doesn't end there. They've got a legitimate Division I offensive lineman in Jimmy Kerr. He has gotten offers from mid-level teams, including West Point. And the Army, had a chance to talk to him a little bit about why he'd even consider it. He talked a lot about sense of duty and all the things that you look for in a leader. And he's one of the leaders on that football team in a lot of ways, but especially up front where he's a big body mover. And, they do have a couple guys they have to replace up front. But they also are moving a guy into the line, Hayden Hyman, who was a big tight end last year. He's gonna move on to the line. He had an opportunity to talk a little bit about how that's working out. I think he was pretty excited going in. Haven't had a chance to talk to him since they've actually started playing, scrimmages and things like that. But I know he was pretty excited about the opportunity to move into that line. But one question mark they have is who's going to replace some of the who's going to catch the ball from Jace, because they did lose a couple of really good receivers in Dawson Smale, Brady Quinn, Tommy Smith. Dawson obviously playing Division I baseball at Xavier. Tommy Smith playing Division II baseball at Clarion, and Brady Quinn himself a great athlete. They do have Mason Burford though, just a junior. Mason, 35 catches, 705 yards, 15 touchdowns, had the most touchdowns on the team a year ago. And then Cullen Kemmer, who we had an opportunity to see in basketball last year against Port Allegheny, actually won our Player of the Game award. Great athlete. And then Ethan Rex, just a freshman a year ago, didn't really carry the ball a lot, but he's a guy that I think that they really think and they're really high on. And don't forget about Noah Harrison. Noah just committed to playing Division II baseball as well. So, there's some college athletes on this football team. And, now the path is a little more open. I wouldn't be stunned if we saw Farrell versus Central Clarion in a state semifinal game. I think that's a real possibility at this point.
Yeah, and it's funny. I just went and I was looking at Westinghouse.
Well, I guess that would be a correction. I think that'd be the state quarterfinals, not the state semifinals.
Yeah. But in consecutive weeks a year ago, Westinghouse beat Central Clarion 46-30, and then turn around and beat Farrell 36-20. So you got to think two of the teams that are licking their chops the most, with Westinghouse being out of 2A, are Central Clarion and Farrell. And we talked often a year ago what it would be, what a game between those two teams would look like. And we may get a chance to see that, as you mentioned, again, this year in the postseason. And I think that would be just a phenomenal matchup.
Now, of course,
between two teams with really high expectations and aspirations this year.
Now, of course, standing in the way of a state title is Central Columbia. 7 consecutive state titles in AA. Somebody was trying to say they're down though. They might not even win their own district this year, but yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. I mean, I don't care how down you say Central Columbia.
I heard somebody say that last year
Southern
too.
Columbia is, but
yeah,
until somebody beats Southern Columbia is the champion.
Exactly.
Brian, that kind of does it for our questions. Couple of things though that one and they're actually both up your way in the couple of long losing streaks. Can they come to an end? Sheffield's lost 27 in a row. A lot of talk that the school may not exist next year, so this might be their last opportunity. They have a very winnable game though this week. A game against Bucktail. Now Bucktail beat them twice last year, but Bucktail doesn't have a ton of numbers. But you talked to me earlier today about how they played Maplewood really tough in a scrimmage. Is this maybe the year that we see Sheffield football maybe turn things around a little bit?
Well, I had a chance to go up there and see one of their practices last week and talk to a couple of the players and head coach Mike Barr and as I see perennial ultimate Sheffield fan Leroy Winslow commenting on our feed here.
He's guaranteeing a win on Saturday.
Well, I'll tell you what, if he brings some of that pork and takes it over to Bucktail's locker room that he made on that day I was up there, they may just pass out from a food coma and not be able to play the football game. But
hey, Leroy, why don't we have a tailgate with the YDL Sports Network and some of your pork here coming up? If it's as good as Brian's telling me it is here.
Hey, well, we'll be there. We'll be there on October 12th for sure to broadcast that game they're playing against Union City. So maybe we'll make that happen. But there's a lot of confidence in the ability for this Sheffield team to bring that streak to an end. And a lot of it stems from the fact that, as I mentioned, right at the top of the show, that the group of guys that they got from Abraxas this year had some football experience and know how to play the game. And so they were able to go into camp, and instead of spending the first couple of days, teaching guys what a 3-point stance is, they were able to get right into, schemes and, play calling and things like that. And so that puts them already well ahead of where they've been every year since Mike Barr took over as head coach of the program. And you mentioned there's a lot of talk up here in Warren County about the future of the Warren County School District and what schools will be here and what schools may not be here. And so I think that's a bit of a driving factor too.
Well, and it kind of leads me into
They
my
understand, if this is it, they want to go out with a couple of wins under their belt and have a good taste in their mouth if it is the end for Sheffield.
well, that kind of, not just at Sheffield, but for basically what's the what's going to happen with football at small schools. District 9 with Elk County Catholic moving down to, or co-oping. What it's 22 schools now playing football in District 9. It was 25 a decade ago, or a little over a decade ago. If Sheffield goes away, it's down to 21. There was a lot of talk today about would Kennedy Catholic be able to go in its opener. There's some talk about whether Bucktail can go in its. I hate to broach this subject, but is football sustainable at small schools now? I almost feel like without co-ops, it's not.
Yeah, I think it's so much more about these schools being proactive rather than reactive, right? Like you mentioned the Elk County St. Mary's co-op, and that was hey, we see the writing on the wall here, and as opposed to we get 2 or 3 games into a season and suddenly don't have enough players to play. Let's take a step now and form a co-op, and get it so that these kids who want to play can play a full season. And we saw it a couple of years ago with West Middlesex and Sharpsville. It's the same thing. They realized, like, hey, we're not going to, we're probably not going to have enough guys to finish the season. So, rather than play half a year and then, those kids, and especially those seniors, getting stuck and kind of left out in the cold, hey, let's form the co-op now and find a way to keep the opportunities going for these kids to make sure they can have a full season. So I think it's got to be proactive.
Sometimes you can try to be proactive. Today, Bob Greenberg from 96.7, a great job over in Mercer County doing things, reached out and talked to, talking fine that Kennedy Catholic has tried to get some co-ops going, and they just can't find anybody to take them on. And, it kind of takes two. It took a few years. Elk County Catholic, this wasn't their first go at trying to get to try to get something going, and it took a few years, and you got to have willing school districts to go with you. You got to have people understand that they may lose some identity. I mean, I look at the Central Clarion co-op and how they had to even like rebrand it a different name between Clarion and Clarion Limestone to get it to work. We saw in the winter where there was an attempt to get Keystone as part of the Union AC Valley, and the Keystone people pushed back and said, no, we don't want to. They don't have great numbers either, but they're gonna try to make it go. Johnny Songer, the athletic director at Cameron County, and I've talked about this a few times. At some point, do some of these schools look at 8-man football, or is that going to have to be led by an effort on the PIAA?
Well, I think honestly, something like an 8-man solution might have to be led in a grassroots way, similar to the way that the girls wrestling was led, where it just became like, hey, we're going to go force the issue at our school to, make it a school sanctioned sport and force the PIAA to kind of take this on as a sport. That may have to be the way that it goes. But again, you've got to have somebody kind of leading that charge. And I think there's a lot of, you mentioned it, there's a lot of identity and, a lot of pride, I think gets in the way a lot of times, but, people just wanting to, football, I think, is just different than any other sport in Northwest Pennsylvania, especially. It's that kind of, you know, blue collar identity. This is who we are. We go out and we play football on Friday nights, and the whole town comes out, and it's hard to let that go sometimes because so many people have tied so much of their time and effort and energy into doing those things that, make Friday night lights what they are. Um, that it becomes very, very difficult to let that go. And so, sometimes you have the blinders on until it's too late.
Yeah, I mean, doing a quick count, and I might be off by one or two, but 8 of the 22 in District 9 are already co-op programs. And,
Mhm.
a couple of those, like the Auto Oswego program, you wonder, is it going to have to add somebody else? What happens at Smethport? You're talking about a team that was the perennial state power in the 90s and before. But the population base isn't growing. The population base isn't growing because the jobs aren't there.
Mhm.
And without jobs, you can't grow a young people population base because the parents don't have anywhere to work. And then you get a lot of transient populations coming in. I know that's been a big issue, a big talk around Claring County. A lot of the student housing for what was Claring University, now part of the Penn West system, numbers are way down, and so you get a lot of government assisted housing and people moving in, but those people are transient, they're in and out. And then of course we know about the PIAA transfer rules and all of that. And the whole it's not the same. You've lost a lot of middle class jobs. It's more of a socioeconomic problem than it's a people don't want to play football problem.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think you mentioned Bob Greenberg, and he had tweeted something out earlier today about participation numbers, and the top sport for boys is still football, and probably by a pretty good margin. Over 1 million students playing football.
Well, of course, you need more of them to play too, though.
Well, yeah, but again, so I think that again just goes to show that football is still king in Pennsylvania.
There's no question. It's just how's it going to look? I don't ever foresee it going away, but the real question does become how does it look at the end of the day?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
that's gonna. And those are the questions that a lot of programs, a lot of schools, a lot of communities need to start having. They're not, as you said, they're not easy because so much of a community's identity, especially at the small rural schools in both District 9 and District 10, is surrounded by it's our high school football team. And I don't think it's an issue with the kids. I think that you talk to the kids, they just want to play. You see that whether it's Warren and Sheffield in girls basketball, or Clarion CO in soccer, or other sports, or Forest area in North Clarion and doing that. The kids want to play. I think it's more of the adults getting there, understanding that things aren't like they were when you were in high school in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was in high school in the mid 1990s. When some of my cousins were in high school in the 80s, or even older, like your mom in the 70s and 80s, my parents in the 60s. It's just,
so appreciate that.
it's just not the same. The things are different, and the quicker that people understand that things won't always look the way they look, I think the more enjoyment the kids will get out of it.
Yeah. Well, I think my one of my taglines over the last 6-7 months has been, nostalgia is a hell of a drug. And it can really kind of cloud the judgment sometimes because, when you get older and you start looking back at some of the things and, maybe you didn't necessarily appreciate it for what it was in the moment. And you look back on it and say, oh man, that was a really good time in my life. But that clouds the reality that particular point in time isn't going to exist now. And for a variety of reasons, a lot of them we touched on right here. And so people have to. Yes, it's nice to look back and say, "Hey, I had this experience as a kid when I was in high school, and this is how it was, and it was great and it was fantastic, and that's awesome." And you should hold on to that memory, and you should share that with your children. But you have to understand that your kids and the kids that are coming up now are going to have to make different kinds of memories because the world that existed then does not exist today.
Well, we just had one, and we'll not name who it was. We had somebody in the comments talk about the kids are soft today. And I find myself saying that sometimes too, but I don't think that is the biggest issue. I just think that every generation's a little different. Were they soft when they added football helmets? That were are you soft because I don't know if that's the biggest reason. I just think that every generation has something that they look at, and there's so many more things for kids to do today than there were when we were there.
Yeah,
and not only is there so many other things to do, I do think at times that students get pulled away from playing football because they want to work, and specifically in the summer, where this has become a whole summer where coaches want you at practices, or they want you at their open fields, they want you at their 7-on-7s, and I think they forget. Some coaches, I think, forget that you're still talking about kids, and some of these kids might need to work. Some of these kids just want to have fun. Some of them have been play sports in all 3 seasons, and they need a chance to decompress a little bit. I think you and I talked about that a lot as adults, that we need time to decompress a little bit after what we do. And so I think there's a lot of different reasons, but the biggest one is just there aren't as many kids, and it still takes probably 25 to 30 legitimate football players to make this go. And football is a sport where you're going to have injuries and you're going to have to replace them. So probably you're really looking at 35 to 40 kids who, and I'm not just talking about team members. I'm talking about people that can actually play and help you. Right. And all you have to do is walk in any of these small schools, and there's, you walk into cafeterias, and the cafeterias are half full because there aren't as many kids as there were 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, a perfect example, and part of the reason why we're having the discussions that we're having in the Warren County School District right now is because since the year 2000, which is when I graduated, the total student population across the county is decreased by 40%. In less than 25 years, we've lost 40% of the kids that we had. That's, like you said, it's just some things are just not going to be sustainable because you can only stretch yourself so far. And while the kids are decreasing, the options of what the kids can do are increasing. So, eventually it comes to a point where the kids are making decisions based on where their interests lie, and athletics, and you mentioned generation.
And even within athletics, I mean, you think about how many soccer programs were there 30 years ago versus how many there are now. Yeah. You're going to start to see this in girls athletics. No, everybody, and look, I'm all for the adding of sports. Okay. I'm not trying to say, hey, we shouldn't add these sports, but how many girls that might have given basketball a try will now give wrestling a try? And so how will that eventually affect girls basketball numbers? I mean, we're already seeing that there. In the spring, you're going to have spring football with the girls. They're going to have opportunities there. How does that affect track programs? How does that affect softball program? Right. These are things that are meant for big school districts. And frankly, in District 9 and District 10, yes, we have big school districts, but we don't have very many of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you mentioned all of those things about the girls' sports. And sorry, I started reading a comment and I totally lost where I was going with that point. But yeah, again, options are great. But like you said, like I know there were some girls that were playing basketball a couple of years ago that switched to wrestling this past year. And those are the kind of things that happen. And then it becomes, well, hey, how do we keep this going? And then you add on top of that the additional options, the proliferation of sports specialization, and coaches telling kids they need to focus on one sport year round to be able to get to whatever level it is that they want to get to. and then that impacts different programs, especially at small schools. I talked to a lot of the 1A coaches, and I say, what's the relationship like with other coaches during your season? And most of the time it's, hey, we're trying to, hey, we know I can't have football players just playing football year round. They need them to play basketball. They need them to wrestle. Somebody needs to play, baseball or run track. And, so there comes a point where you can't just tell kids you have to pick one and stick with it year round, because eventually you run out of kids to field all of your teams.
No question. And then you think things like robotics classes and some of the other things that they've got opportunities to do now might take somebody away from that. And it just there's no easy answer. And I'm not saying that we have any of the answers. And we're identifying some of the problems, but obviously not all of them either. But that's going to do it for us here tonight, Brian. I appreciate everybody joining us here on the Allegheny Grille of Foxburg YDL Sports Network preseason football show. This will be available for those. If you have friends or family who didn't have an opportunity to join us tonight, they can always catch it. We'll leave it up on the site. It'll be on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, all those things. So
and appreciate all the comments too. Everybody who's chimed in on the conversation. I certainly appreciate that as well.
Yeah, you can always check us out. Don't forget Friday night. Brian's going to have Warren versus Conneaut. I've got Central Clarion versus Du Bois with in my airtime, I think is 6:30. Not sure what time you're going on, Brian.
Probably somewhere in that neighborhood.
So again, thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. Special thanks to my colleague Brian Hagberg. Well, Brian, this is Chris Rossetti saying good